Rebel Force Radio presents.
I am Boba Fett.
Boba Fett.
Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule with respect.
Boba Fett.
This is Rebel Force Radio's The Book of Boba Fett. After Show.
That's right, chut, everybody. Welcome back to Rebel Force Radio's Book of Boba Fett. After Show, we're looking at Chapter 3. I hope you watched it. If you're watching this live and you haven't seen it, this is going to be one of those non-spoiler. We're going to be here for a long time, breaking it all down. None of this non-spoilery stuff. We're going to spoil the heck out of this episode. It's going to be so spoiled, so smelly. Now, for some of you, based on some of the comments that I'm seeing come across their social media, it's already smelly. Some of you didn't like this episode. And that was one of the things. So as much as I try to avoid all that stuff, because I don't get to see the episode usually till evening time, I saw a few things coming across my YouTube feed, some of the YouTubers that I watched, they're like, this episode was terrible and blah, blah. So I went in with fairly low expectations and I came out and I really liked it. I kept waiting during the episode, like, what's everyone so mad about? Wookie totally unleashed. I'm like, why is everyone so mad? Riding rancors? Weren't they talking about riding rancors? Weren't they talking about riding rancors? Or we saw riding rancors on Felucia, the jungle rancor. I mean, that was a Hasbro toy that came out. I just don't understand what everyone is so upset about. I do have some gripes, and I have some gripes that I'm willing to give voice to now because we're 3 episodes deep, and there's some things that have been kind of bugging me since the beginning that now 3 episodes in, I'm like, all right, I think I need to, maybe we need to take a look at this some more. But just, on a whole, I just thought that this episode, just looking at it was really good. So, but that's my opinion. We're going to find out what the rest of you all think when you call in later on the show. You can also, of course, participate in the chat here. And we've got our watchful eyes and our watchful ears on all of your comments. That is me. My name is Jason, if you're new to the program. And, of course, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. I snorted a lizard right before the show. So
Did it help?
I'm ready to go, man. I'm ready to go. I'm feeling good. And it does feel like you swallow it. But what happens, it really kind of plants itself up in your head. Somebody sent me a graphic of how it all works.
Really?
Yeah.
They've got a graphic of this?
There's a graphic of it. I have to find it and email it to you because it's a hoot. But yeah, little lizards up in the nose, little lizards up in the head. And I'm ready to talk about Boba Fett. People are being really harshly critical of this episode. And like you, Jason, I can nitpick it a little bit. But on the whole, I thought it was pretty damn good. And there are just some things in this episode I thought were pretty damn great, actually. Yeah. And right. And so I'm actually I got notes this time. I haven't taken notes on any episode until now, but I keep kicking myself for forgetting to say things during the show, and then it'll hit me a day or two after we're done with it, and that is kind of the curse of the podcaster to begin with. But I really just we have one shot at evaluating these Boba Fett episodes right when they drop, the day they drop. So I want to be as comprehensive as possible. So look out, I got notes.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. I remember when the sequel trilogy films were dropping, and we would see the movie and then run off and do a live show in front of an audience, and spill our guts out. And of course, our opinions evolved and they changed. I'm sure they will about Mandalorian and Bad Batch and of course Book of Boba Fett. It's just the nature of I think being a fan of this saga. Certain things age really well, some things don't age so well, and. But this episode, let's get in. Let's do the tail of the tape here. We are talking about Book of Boba Fett, the 3rd episode. Original air date was January 12th, 2022. Just a little bit shorter runtime than the last episode, just a little over 37 minutes. Directed this time by Robert Rodriguez and written by Jon Favreau. So the Streets of Mos Espa. Oh, by the way, gosh, I would be remiss, and so many people were saying, I can't believe that Tyler didn't get to give his final thoughts last week. So Tyler, our wonderful call screener and good friend of the program, I'm so sorry that I forgot about you at the end of last week's episode. We will definitely hit your thoughts about this as we get closer to the end of the program. But how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. You know, very divisive episode, and that always brings for a good conversation. So,
all right. Well, the number to call, 708-866-1737. So call us up. You'll talk to Tyler. He'll get a sense of what you want to talk about, who you are, and we'll do our best to get everybody on. But we have more callers sometimes than we have time for. So, but that's not a bad thing. But you can still enjoy the show while you're on hold. I think it's set up that way. So. And then when we do get to you, please turn down your whatever it is you're listening to the show on. So if you're watching it on your TV, your smart TV, or whatever, you know, that helps turn it down. So 708-866-1737. So Tyler will check in with you in a little bit. All right. Appreciate it as always, man. So Jim, some big ideas in this episode that I just jotted down. I just want to throw out is sort of like I don't know, like we're setting the table for discussion. I want to get your thoughts on some of these, of course. Have we seen the conclusion of the Tusken arc? We see the tribe is wiped out. Yet we know he still has time with Tuskens because that's where we meet him at Mandalorian Season 2. But where do you see this going in terms of the Tusken arc?
Well, now we don't necessarily meet him with Tuskens in Mandalorian Season 2, but he is seen observing the Krayt Dragon battle and the fallout of all of that. So we don't know.
You're right. I think at the end of that episode, there were some assumptions that he was hiding out within, because we didn't know anything about Boba at that time, at least his connection to the Tuskens, that he was hiding out within their ranks. But you're right to point out we don't know that.
And Boba is getting very close to being a Tusken himself. The only thing he's missing are the face wrappings, essentially.
Right.
He's riding banthas. He's wearing their cloaks. He's carrying the gaffy stick, and he's living among them. But then when he goes to negotiate with the Pykes, he returns to find the camp completely massacred.
Yeah.
And the reason why I know we're going to keep carrying on via flashbacks, the first thing that needs to be resolved was set up in the flashback in this episode when Boba meets with the Pykes, and he says that he's going to remove the Niktos from the situation. He's going to go and deal with them. The Niktos, which the name of their biker gang was established in this episode. It's not the Kanji Club. It's the Kintin Striders. The Kintin Striders is the Nikto Speeder gang we've seen in the first few episodes of the Book of Boba Fett.
Also known as the Nikto Sand Riders. The
Sand Riders.
Well, it was interesting
I
because
just said Nikto Speeder gang was just
no. It was interesting because the Pike leader calls them the Kintan Striders, and then Boba calls them in the same scene the Nikto Sand Riders, showing that maybe there's two different names for them based on who you are.
Yeah. Well, yes. I think that was just a little bit of exposition to give us, an exact idea of who he's talking about, the Niktos. So Boba is going to have to deal with that. We're going to see that via flashback, probably in the next episode. Also, he's now seeking revenge because it's clear it was the Niktos who burned down and killed all those Tusken Raiders. And who didn't shed a tear for those dead banthas? You can leave people laying out, blood in the streets, but I see a furry animal laying there. Oh my God, my heart is broken. It takes me back to when the Imperials raided Lumpy's bedroom in the Star Wars Holiday Special, and they beheaded his toy bantha.
Oh my gosh.
This did happen. I'm not making this up. And so when Lumpy returned to his room to see all of everything torn apart and just all of his belongings everywhere, he took that headless bantha, put it in the bed, put the covers over the bantha, and then put the head there and kissed the bantha.
Oh, tear your heart out.
So the lumpy in me was weeping like a baby watching those dead banthas.
Oh man, yeah, that was sad. I kept looking for, and we had a listener write in and said, "Hey, Jason, you're always complaining about how dark everything is. Maybe you should try turning your HDR off, the high dynamic range, so you can see it better." Because I found that scene when he discovers the carnage there in the Tusken camp. I was trying to look for specific, Tuskens. We saw the chief, we saw the armorer, and did we see the little boy that he had been friends with? We didn't see him.
We saw his stick, and that leads me to assume that the boy is gone.
Yeah,
they
it's
just
Disney.
aren't in
You
the
don't
habit.
see the kid.
Right. The
that's
kid's
tough.
laying there bleeding in the sand.
Right.
No blood in Star Wars. I was almost expecting there to be some blood in this episode, but there was no blood. When Krrstantan was attacking the Gamorreans, I thought, oh yeah, there's gonna be blood flying, but
green
no
blood. Green pig blood.
Could have been green blood. Green blood. That's possible. It's possible.
Yeah. All right, so we got lots to discuss. So if you have some thoughts and some theories about the what's going on with the Tuskens, okay, let's talk a little bit about rancors and rancor keepers. We got sort of some new information there. We found out that they're quite loving. They're obviously great fighters. They imprint on the first human they see, and I didn't really have a problem with this, and I'll tell you why. Because I know some people are like, no, they should just be badass, and they should just, be like monsters, and we don't want it rated PG. I remember, and I know this is not G-level canon per se, but I remember reading the Return of the Jedi novelization, and when you read the scene with Luke going up against the Rancor, you get into Luke's head a little bit, and he has just incredible empathy for the Rancor. He realizes that the Rancor is being kept down there and kept hungry, and it's scared, and it's, all of these things. And he really looks at his decision to kill the Rancor. It helps justify it. He thinks it's almost a mercy killing in a sense. And so I've just never had, and you got the Rancor keeper going in there and shedding a tear over the thing. I just never really thought that there wasn't a possibility that there could be more to a Rancor than that.
Wow. You're so right to bring up the original Rancor keeper, because he gave us sympathy for that beast way back in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is perfectly consistent for these guys who train and tame these beasts to develop some sort of affinity for them and learn what makes them tick. To others on the outside, they're grotesque monsters that will rip you in shreds. And that hasn't been taken away from the Rancor. Believe me, they aren't introducing a Rancor into this show just for us to know it's down in the dungeon. We're going to see this sucker in action. Okay?
Yes.
And we're going to see it in action with Boba Fett riding it. How great is that? When we were first introduced to Boba Fett, and this was referred to via Favreau's dialogue, when Boba says, I've ridden beasts much bigger than this. He's talking about the holiday special. Here I go back to the holiday special again. Jon Favreau has professed his love for the holiday special over the years. And in the holiday special animated short, where we get introduced to Boba Fett, he's riding this giant dinosaur type thing. Huge. And then, of course, the Mandalorian culture, they're known to tame the mythosaur. And this kind of thing is, while Boba isn't necessarily a Mandalorian per se, there's something about their culture that he connects to clearly. And via his father, Jango was a foundling, and Jango was raised within the Mandalorian culture. So he obviously passed down a lot of that heritage to his son, Boba. And even though Boba had never had the opportunity to really spend time with the Mandalorians, he still has intimate knowledge and a family connection to them. So So Boba's going to ride a Rancor, folks. If you can't look forward to Boba Fett on a flipping Rancor, then you might as well just check out a Star Wars altogether. And then you reminded me at the beginning of the show that, of course, Rancors were in The Force Unleashed, and they were tamed and they were able to be used as mounts. And, of course, going way back to early EU, The Courtship of Princess Leia by Dave Wolverton. That novel's been a little maligned over the years, but it establishes a lot of things, most notably the Witches of Dathomir.
Yeah. I think because it came out fairly soon after the Zahn trilogy, which was so, beloved, and just about anything coming after that might have, not been looked at. But yeah, I mean, but it is OG EU, that novel, Courtship of Princess Leia. The other thing I wanted to say too. Oh, by the way, this is a little image that my son drew. He was so excited about the idea of. Well, some of this, I think he kind of traced the outline, but all of the detail work, he did.
Wow!
But he was pretty excited about. Well, what had happened was he saw the episode where they fight the sand monster, and he went online trying to find a picture of that to draw. And this is what he found.
Boba Fett riding a Rancor.
Rancor. So there's concept art somewhere out there, and it may be part of leaked, or it could be, I don't know what it's from. But anyway, and he was disappointed a couple weeks ago when he realized that, it wasn't the sand monster. And I said, hold on to that picture, Parker. That may come back. That may come back. But yes. No, and here's the point. Last point I want to make about the Rancor. For those that are saying, I don't want to see the Rancor, turned into a puppy dog or whatever. Is there a person that watched this episode that wasn't in the back of your mind or even in the front of your mind thinking that there was a possibility that Rancor was going to try to reach out and eat Boba Fett? So I wouldn't be so, when those eyes opened up, and the Rancor keeper was acting real squirrely, like, he'll be back. And it's like, what, your meal will be back or what? Because I'm still not 100% convinced that this guy, the Danny Trejo character, the new Rancor keeper, is on the up and up. But
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. No, I totally got vibes that this could be a setup. That this is like a Trojan horse.
No, the Hutts did bring him in, right?
Right,
okay, I like the way you're thinking.
Yeah. Eat him from the inside.
Number one, I love seeing Danny Trejo in the Book of Boba Fett. I've been meaning to say for the past couple of weeks, this is a Robert Rodriguez thing. And so the second I saw Danny Trejo, I knew that this episode was directed by Rodriguez. I didn't have to wait for the credits.
It's his cousin, isn't it?
Trejo.
Aren't they cousins?
Are they cousins? He's in every one of Rodriguez's films, He's in
I thought they're like either first or second cousins, something like that.
Yeah. And after we watched the first episode, my son said, yeah, so when is Danny Trejo going to show up in this? Because he's in every Rodriguez episode. I said, oh, that's pretty good. I'm going to say that on the show. And I forgot. And then sure enough, 3 weeks later, Danny Trejo shows up. And I'm like, oh, I should have said that.
He's the Clint Howard of Robert Rodriguez.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But he's always just like kind of from another galaxy himself, like in the real world. So I thought he fit in well with Star Wars. And as a Rancor keeper, I can't think of a better role for him to play. And, of course, continuing the Star Wars tradition with Danny, he was in Fanboys as Chief. And he, sent the fanboys on their own vision quest, and he didn't need lizards for that.
That's right. Did it the old-fashioned way, man.
Yeah. The very old-fashioned way.
I was watching the episode. So we've now declared Wednesday night is pizza night in the house, so we can all get home and we get pizza and we watch Book of Boba Fett, so I can go down and do my thing. And my wife was, talking about that. We were talking about the Rancor keeper, and she's a zoologist and into the animals and all that stuff, and she was talking about, there are falconers, and falcons wear those hoods with coverings over their eyes to keep them. Mm-hmm. So I never thought of, to me, up until tonight, the Rancor keeper was one guy, an action figure, a fat dude named Malik Healy. Mm-hmm. Now I realize it's Rancor keeper is like falconer, or it's a thing, it's a job, it's an occupation. And it never really occurred to me that there were other Rancor keepers till we met Danny Trejo.
Yeah. Well, somebody has to be in charge of that menagerie.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
And the pooper scooper.
Yeah. It ain't job of pushing that thing around. So, yeah. Great to see the Rancor, though. Here they are. It couldn't be funded by HasLab, but we are actually getting it in the Book of Boba Fett.
You were so right. You said that. You said, I think, people are going to be really disappointed about that HasLab because now, So more I'm sure to talk about with the Rancor. Let's talk about Wookie Unleashed. I mean, I think we've always wanted to see, total Wookie rage, and we didn't really even see it that much in Revenge of the Sith, despite seeing, Wookiee warriors on Kashyyyk. They seemed more like military. It was like watching Planet of the Apes a little bit. They were running around with their, but this was like just total barbaric, hulking out, busting him out of the back to tank. Yeah.
If I can just rewind real quick, you do get that sense of Wookiee rage when you see Han Solo fight Chewie on that planet Mimban.
I wasn't even thinking about Solo. You're right.
That's the Wookiee rage there on display, but still Krrstantan. And by the way, it appears they may have dropped the Black Krrstantan moniker, and they're just going with Krrstantan.
Yeah.
So I always that never worked for me in the comic books. It just seemed like kind of a speed bump.
It was a little on the nose, right?
Yeah. Okay. We get it. Yeah.
Right.
He's
not brown.
But I mean, it's just sort of an obvious comic booky thing to do. So I'm glad in live action it's just Krrstantan. That sounds much more Wookiee-like to me.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I will say, I did have to suspend my disbelief. I mean, when he was like given, it was like a wrestling match, man. When he was given Boba the bear hug and you heard the cracking, and I was like,
I love that.
There was for a split second, I'm like, it can't end this way. Like it looked like he was, going down in a big way. And then the street toughs come running in. That's where I had a little bit of a problem. It's hard for me to think that Wookiee wouldn't have made real quick work of those kids. Now they did have, some, bionic or, droid parts that made them, somewhat formidable. I think there were 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
Versus
and
the
weapons.
Wookiee. Yeah. With weapons. Right.
He still, to give him credit, he still threw all 5 of them out of the room.
Right. Yes, he did. That's right. And you got a little bit of context for where that room is, because he fell down the stairs, which leads into the main stairwell where you come into Jabba's palace.
Wait, let me take that back. I'm replaying the fight in my head. He didn't throw them out of the room. He threw the Gamorreans out of the room and continued to fight them down in the throne room. And then the gang known as the Mods, they're known as the Mods. This was revealed in the audio commentary, the descriptive audio track.
Oh, okay. All right. I was wondering if they had an official name. They're the Mods.
Which makes sense. They're known as mods because they're modified.
What's a mod? Yeah.
What's a mod? But they're modified.
It's a deep cut.
That is. They've modified their bodies with robotic parts, droid parts, whatever.
Yeah, resistance is futile.
But the name itself, mods, lends to their appearance a little bit with the colorful scooter speeders and their clothing and everything. They're based on the London mods, or just kind of. That's sort of what's used the foundation for the London mod movement from the 60s, which eventually became the foundation for like punk rockers and all kind of different things. But I mean, the mods of the 60s, they rode around on the Vespa scooters. You could see them in the Who film Quadrophenia. I think that's the extent of my mod knowledge, or maybe the
more than I got. I looked at him.
The beginning of Austin Powers might be a little moddy too.
I looked at him and I just thought, they're sort of like a post-apocalyptic, street gang. I was thinking like Mad Max and that sort of thing. I would say, Jim, based on what I've seen, and I haven't really, consumed a lot of it, but it feels as though this was one of the most divisive elements of this episode. Either you really liked the mods, or you hated the mods. I didn't really care. Like, they didn't bother me. I thought it was a little. I thought that the Wookiee, and in my mind, the Wookiee would have made really quick work of them. But all right, fine. It is what it is. They didn't offend me to any great degree, and maybe it's because I'm not as steeped in some of the pop culture that has seen that type of character emerge before. But Star Wars is also an amalgam of a lot of things that have bubbled up through pop culture. So I didn't find it overly offensive. They're not my favorite characters. I would say, I kept thinking to myself, what if this was an animated series and these characters popped up? We'd probably, I probably would dislike them even more, honestly. But there was live action, and I thought it was interesting. It does take me into another point, but we'll get into that in a little bit about Boba Fett. My overall concern about Boba Fett being a little bit too much of a softie, that's starting to bother me. But the mods, if they continue to be central, I think moving forward, they might wear out their welcome rather quickly. But this could be a kind of a one and done. I don't know. What do you think? Are they here to stay?
Yeah. Well, nobody leaves in this show. All
well,
three
that's
episodes,
true.
You have the Mayor's Major Domo. All 3 episodes, you have 8D8. We're not really going anywhere. We're on the planet.
Christ, you still have the city hall clerk showing up. That guy.
Yeah. That
Burger
guy.
Chef.
I looked him up on IMDb, and he's got some funny character names in his resume. Guys like, he plays a character named Greaseball in one show. He plays like Weird Dude in another show.
Yeah.
He's his name's Galen Howard.
Yeah.
Shout out to Galen and his mullet.
That's commitment right there.
Yeah, but as far as the gang goes, the street gang goes, I think we're definitely going to be seeing much more of them. Their names have even been said on screen yet, but the girl, her name, it is confirmed. She is Drash, as we reported, and the guy with the eye is Scad, excuse me. Drash, played by Sophie Turner, and from I'm sorry, Sophie Thatcher. Thatcher. You guys could tell when I'm going off notes, can't you? Sophie Turner, Sophie Thatcher, and Jordan. Jordan, what was his last name? Bolger.
Yeah.
And so all of that information that we had before turned out to be correct. No Dr. Aphra for you comic book fans. I'm so sorry.
Well,
but don't worry, she'll be showing up sometime.
I was gonna
necessarily in Book of Boba Fett, but sometime.
Is it not possible that Drash could morph or turn into Dr. Aphra, or is the continuity such that Dr. Aphra is already established in this timeline?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Aphra is established in this
all right. Well,
and she does not have a cybernetic arm.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of thing sort of eliminates that speculation. But the street gang, the mods, they'll be back. But let's talk a little bit about more Krrstantan.
Yeah,
that's what we were talking about
right
before I brought up the mods and everything. But the Krrstantan attack. What's up with the Gamorreans? They're the worst bodyguards.
Oh my God, they're terrible. Which they really weren't that great in Jedi either, but they at least looked more intimidating. These guys look like a couple of dopes that are, I keep saying they're dad bod Gamorrean guards. These are guys that you run into the gym, at the first part of January, just dopey guys with no stick-to-itiveness, no staying power.
How does a giant Wookiee walk into the palace and attack Boba while he's in the Bactapod? How does that happen? The Gamorreans need to be accountable for this, and one of them needs to be fed to the Rancor. I mean that. I mean, that's how I would do it. But a lot of people are giving Boba advice on how to be an intimidating leader, and he's not listening to him. He's not listening to 88. He's not listening to Fennec Shan. And as a result, he has very little respect around Mos Espa, Mos Eisley, anything that, Moss,
any of the Mosses.
All the Mosses. They think he's a punk.
Right.
They think he's a punk. He's a pretender to claim the throne of Crime Lord. He did what he had to do. He shot Bib Fortuna. But he has yet to really defend his claim outside of some conversation and negotiations.
Yeah. Well, there was some, I think, pretty necessary and welcome exposition at the beginning of the episode with 8D8 talking about after the what did they call it, the tragedy of the
disaster,
the sail barge disaster. It's like one of those things. I don't mean to compare it to 9/11, but what I'm saying is, like, it has a name, like in history already. The sail barge disaster. I'm sure everybody on Tatooine remembers where they were the day they heard that Jabba's
notoriety
sail barge blew up. But what happened is, and I think this makes a lot of sense, and we've been talking within our own Jedi Council through emails, very secret, encrypted emails, about that this really makes sense when you think about Boba Fett. So what happened is Jabba's dead, Boba inherits. But Boba's a worm. Boba doesn't have any real, despite the pointy teeth, he doesn't have any real teeth.
Bib.
What did I say? Boba. Gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Bib. Sorry.
Honest mistake.
Bib. I get my bubas. Bib, he doesn't have a lot of teeth. And so what they do is they split the territory that used to belong to Jabba the Hutt across 3 families, the Trandoshans, the Aqualish, and the Klatooinians. And Bib just sort of sits there as they don't say this, but I'm assuming is almost like a figurehead, a puppet. He's paying off the mayor, and he gets to live like a king and probably not really do much because most of Mos Espa was being run by the Trandoshans, the Aqualish, and the Klatooinians. And so you don't really get the sense that he was really a force to be reckoned with, which then makes you, I think, helps you to understand why all of these attacks on Boba Fett, why everybody, because people are saying, well, why 5 years? 5 years and everything was tranquil and everything. Yeah, it was all status quo. Everybody's getting paid off. Things were running efficiently. Now, all of a sudden, you knock out Bib, you got a much more aggressive, much more ambitious crime boss. Now everybody has to gird their loins and see what this guy is made of. My problem right now with the show and with the character is he doesn't seem like he's made out of much. They're really going for, Jim, it feels like this honorable, I can't even call him an anti-hero at this point. Right. I don't know what he is yet.
Well, he is a crime lord, and he is trying to extract payment for protection and things like that.
Right.
And some people are going with it and some people aren't. We already saw that the Trandoshans are down with it. The Aqualish too. The Trandoshans presented a Wookiee pelt to Boba.
Right.
The Aqualish came in there with a big box of credits. So that's 2 of the 3, Trandoshans, Aqualish, and then the third is the
Klatooinians.
We don't really know what their deal is.
No. And we know the Niktos are kind of like they're like the thugs, the biker gang. Right.
They're the biker gang. But they're also going around charging tolls and taxes and things, fees for protection and stuff. So that further complicates things on Tatooine. But that was when Jabba was still, no, wait, it wasn't. That was when Bib was in charge. Yes. So it's just like, total chaos, really. But, with the factions being divided up the way they're being divided up, you have, it's basically bigger government. So it's basically, more people watching over the territory as a total.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably promotes more law and order, I guess. I don't know how life is better that way than with Boba trying to consolidate power, because that's what Boba is trying to do, is consolidate all of the power
unto himself.
Yeah. And so naturally some are going along with it because they're assuming he's going to have the same power as Jabba, but he's trying to dig himself out of a hole already because Bib Fortuna didn't have the respect Jabba had. So what makes anybody think now that somebody else is in Jabba's palace, they want things to go back to the way it was, where there was just one crime lord overseeing that vast territory?
All right. Here's an observation, and this just kind of occurred to me. Because for me, the thing that I'm missing is a juxtaposition of the Boba Fett that we either knew or thought we knew in the original trilogy and the Boba Fett of this series. So some things that might help for someone who's thinking like me. You've lost your edge. You're not what you used to be, okay? These types of comments. But that assumes that the galaxy at large knew Boba Fett as well as we as Star Wars fans know Boba Fett. I just assumed that his reputation preceded himself, that he was known throughout the galaxy, feared throughout the galaxy. That doesn't seem to be the case. You've got Stephen Root, great character actor, by the way, Milton / Jimmy James from News Radio. And he shows up and he's like, yeah, nobody respects you. Nobody respects you. And
That's
I'm just
where I know that guy from.
That was Milton. That was Jimmy James. Yeah.
Of course. Oh my! I'm watching going. That guy's he's so.
Oh, he's a great character actor. Been in a ton of things.
So then, when I go to hit the IMDb, who do I look up? Mullet Clerk. What's the matter with me? Why wasn't I looking up that guy?
Oh, you need to look up Lortha Peel. Lortha Peel. So Jim, help me out with this, with the Boba Fett. Michael Mercy on our show last week, he made an observation. He said, maybe Boba Fett just wasn't the badass that we always assumed that he was. We don't have a ton of evidence to support that other than, reputation or aura or, when we actually look at what he does on screen, I don't know. Are they trying to correct or reshape the way we look at Boba in the original trilogy? Is the Boba of the original trilogy, does it have any relevance? It doesn't seem to have any relevance to the Boba of this series.
I could walk you through this.
All right, help me out.
All right. Now, Boba, as we see through a series of events growing up in his life, he was really a loner, He was the man with no name. He was an outlaw. He kept to himself, and he had no loyalty to anything. And the reason that is because, and we get a lot of theme building in these flashbacks where you see young Boba Fett on Camino, and he gets up out of his bed and runs to the window as he sees the Slave One flying off into space, and his father's abandoning him again to go off on some mission, and he's just
and the cat's in the cradle in the silver spoon, little boy. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when.
All right.
Okay,
all
sorry.
All right.
Okay.
That song always makes me cry, Swank. But they've shown us that scene now twice. It's very important because it's establishing actually the baseline for who Boba grows up into. And I'm not talking about some sort of benevolent crime lord who wants to unite all the criminals. I'm talking about the fearsome bounty hunter who expresses loyalty to nothing and no one except for the payday. And that's who I believe Boba Fett always was. He was a loner. He was extremely skilled, the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And he had loyalty to no one except for the job and himself. And that was it.
Yep.
And so we see a Boba now who is evolving, right? I mean, he is discovered loyalty via the Sand People.
Discovered family, you might say, even.
Yeah, for the first time in his life.
Belonging.
He likes how it feels.
Yeah.
He likes how it feels.
Yeah.
And his face is exposed to them, and he is being himself, even though their faces aren't exposed to him.
Right.
That's kind of ironic. But he has a sense of loyalty, a sense of belonging, and he's never ever experienced that in his whole life. And he's considered an old man at this point, at least by the mods. They call him an old man. And so that's part of his evolution. And we see it being visually represented at the end of his vision quest in the last episode, his spiritual journey. How does that whole thing end? With a big splash of water. That's the last visual you see before you see Boba walking across the dunes back toward the camp, holding the branch to build his gaffy stick from. You see a splash of water. Where does that come from? What's that all about? I think it's supposed to harken back to who he was as a child on Camino. And then the water itself is a symbol of rebirth.
Yeah.
It's a baptism. It's a new Boba. So when he comes back and he's holding that branch, he's a new man, and he understands loyalty, and he understands a bigger purpose to his life. So that's how I look at the evolution of how he gets to point A, out of the Sarlacc pit, to point B, a member of the Tusken tribe, to point C, Tatooine gang lord. So Jim, you see it as a fairly, because of this rebirth on the Vision quest, it's a pretty it's a pretty major significant break in the character. It's for all intents and purposes a new man, a new character. So is that why we don't see much? Right, the same skills, but some of the trappings that were there before, we don't quite see. Boba gets brought real down to earth, man, because he's taken away from his money, which was really the only goal he ever had was money, and then he gets placed with these Tuskens, and he's got nothing. I mean, he's starting from. Well, he's fighting in his tidy whities at one point. Yes, or tidy grays, whatever they are. So that's kind of how I'm following this. I dig it on a bigger. I think a lot of this stuff is going to be made clear to people when they can finally see the big picture, because it's still not fully filled in why Boba is the way he is, and that's why these flashbacks are so valuable. We have to understand more about what motivates him to become a crime lord to begin with, because he seemed pretty content in pulling himself completely off the grid and hanging out under the twin suns with a bunch of quote unquote primitives, savages. Well, he may have been a great bounty hunter, and he may have been a convincing Tusken, but so far, I think he's a terrible crime lord. And that may be what we're supposed to get out of this. I mean, I remember the some of the pre-press with Favreau and Filoni, and they talk about. You can go back and read some of the quotes that they had, where they say that this is a Boba that might be in over his head, that this is a Boba that is not used to this. He thinks that he can just walk in and do this, and turns out it's not necessarily the case. And he does want to rule with honor, and we know that the Godfather saga was a big influence on Favreau and Filoni when it comes to this series. And you go back and you watch The Godfather, and they sort of position the Brando Corleone, the whole Corleone family as being sort of a cut above the other families. They're not quite so brutal. That they do tend to be more honorable and have kind of a certain family values and things like that. And I feel like that's what they're going for with Boba Fett. He wants to rule with honor, not fear. We've heard this, time and time again. But at the same time, he is looking weak. Now, we do see him after the attack with Krrstantan. He says, "I got to send a message." I mean, that's some of that dialogue's like right out of The Godfather. I got to send a message. We got to strike back. Yeah. We know that he's. And then that's when the Hutts show up and they kind of derail that conversation. And then at the very end, Fennec says, they're going to war. We see all the Pykes showing up. Are you plugging Rancho Obi-Wan there on the camera? You
Rancho Obi-Wan, we love it. Rancho
You
Obi-Wan.
caught me. You caught me. There it is.
There it
Oh,
is.
look
There's
at
the
all
mug.
the drool. Oh, my drool.
Oh,
is
look
so
at that.
noticeable.
I've got a not that mug. I do have a Rancho
drooling.
Obi-Wan mug in it. Gosh, I used it so much that like there's hardly any Rancho Obi-Wan left from all the dishwashing that I've done. But anyway, Fennec says, well, they're planning to go to war. He says we will be ready. So, yeah, I think that maybe this was the moment. It could have been the Krrstantan attack, another assassination attempt that might have really kind of woken Boba up. But what does he do in front of the Hutts? He gives the guy up. He shows mercy. He shows honor. I mean, some might, us sane people think that it's honor and all this. Some people might say it's naivete. Some people might say it's weakness. I'm reluctant to say that because I don't want to go, I don't want to go there. I want to hold on to my humanity. But if I'm a crime lord, I'm not going to show those signs of weakness. And you made a really great point. He's hearing it from Fennec. He's hearing it from even his droid, 8D8. Like, so there's got to be a lesson to be learned here. And I just feel like he hasn't
it from
learned
the
it yet.
watermonger. The watermonger.
That's
saying,
right.
You have no respect. Milton himself. Milton, who's charging way too much, by the way.
Yeah, he really is. He really is. I didn't have a problem with that. I thought, I think that Boba Fett, in living with the Sand People and the laws and the rules of the tribe and all of that, I think that, fairness and equity was probably something that was, something that they, any civilized society strives for. And so when he sees that kind of stuff, I get the sense that he's still, or that he is a champion of justice and fairness. And he doesn't mind if you make a little bit on the side, but for the most part, you need to be fair. And I get that, and I'm cool with that. One other thing I wanted to mention, and we're gonna again your calls. We've got the
Can I say
switchboard
something about?
Oh yeah, please.
Setting Krrstantan free. You thought it was being naive, but I think Boba has already learned that if you spare one's life, that person will display loyalty for you, or to you. With Fennec Shand, he saved her, so she pledged loyalty to him. He spared the lives of those two Gamorreans when they pledged loyalty to him. So he let them live. And they've been very loyal to him, a little slow, but loyal. And so now I think he's putting the bank on setting Krrstantan free, or Krrstantan. I've heard it pronounced 1,000.
I don't know.
In the show, they pronounce it two different ways. They say Krrstantan, which I've always said, and they also say Chris Anton. Does anybody know Chris Anton? Is there a Chris Anton here? Is there a Chris? What about Seymour Butts? We got a Seymour Butts here. Chris Anton, Seymour Butts. All right, very good. But what I do like when he let him go was Krrstantan. He ran out of there, and
literally
part of me is thinking he's like, well, those 20 people carrying the litter of 2 Hutts, they're not going to be moving very fast through that desert.
No.
So I got the feeling he's chugging after them to go kick everyone's ass.
I don't know,
what
man.
Are you me up for?
I think what he saw is now they actually have a goddamn rancor to go in that pit.
Yeah.
And that was where he was crashing for a few nights. He's not going to be roommates to a rancor. I tell you what,
no, you're
even
right.
a Wookiee.
You're right. You're right. I think he was running for his life. Yeah. I don't think he was
let's talk about
the Hutts.
Let's talk about the pink elephant.
One more thing.
Yes.
One more thing.
Yes.
Boba gave us a new curse word for Star Wars. I don't ever recall hearing this before. He said, "Don't work for scug holes."
Scug holes. Yeah.
Scug holes.
That was.
Now, I like that. That's
I do
some
too.
Star Wars cursing right there.
Bit of a ripoff. That was the name of my high school band, the Scug Holes. I thought we were very originals at the time. No, I actually had a note here about all of the new Star Wars vocabulary. I wrote it down. Dank.
We got the dank ferric,
Gak.
Shortening of that. Gak.
G-A-K. At one point, when he's recruiting the street toughs, he says, "Grab your Gak and follow me." Your gack.
Oh,
I don't know what the hell that is. And then and I wrote down Scughole. So those were my 3 words of the week.
Scuggles.
Scuggles.
All
Don't
right,
work
so
for
let's get
Scuggles.
to what you want to talk
All right,
about.
yeah,
I
the
bet
pink
it's that
elephant in the
speeder
room.
break.
All right, let's talk about the pink
chase, right?
Yeah, the speeder chase.
Yeah,
it wasn't great. It wasn't great.
Yeah, but it's not a crime against society like people are calling it out.
I know, but dude, it's faster, more intense. I mean, it's George. I mean, George would have been like, I mean, these guys back in 1982 were creating better effects and creating more high speed. It was bad. It was bad, and I dare say, embarrassingly bad. It was embarrassingly bad. It was just not great.
There were just.
It was not a crime against humanity. Well, I agree with that.
It's not. It's not. People are treating it like Star Wars should be canceled because of the speeder chase, and you're effing nuts. You guys are effing nuts.
Right.
But here's the thing. People are saying things online like, you want to know how to do a proper chase? Watch a Jason Bourne movie. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that the amount of money they had to spend on that speeder chase is probably like 0.01% of the amount of budget they'd have for a Jason Bourne film. So get that idea out of your head. Those things cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make.
Right.
How much the budget for an episode of any of these Star Wars shows? At the most, it's probably like 10 million an episode. Which when I was a kid, that would be absurd. But to think of, I mean, 10 million an episode, that's how much the original Star Wars was made for pretty much. But for to compare anything that you see on TV, I mean, everyone's forgetting this is a TV show, for Christ's sake.
I just want to point out, for those that think that Jimmy's all wet here, he's absolutely not. Mandalorian was estimated at about $12.5 million per episode. So, and this to me looks like slightly lower budget than Mando. So I think you're dead on with 10 million. I think that's a very fair estimate, if not lower.
Yes. I think it is because obviously with the Mandalorian, they were breaking in new technology, which upped the value. Now that technology is being farmed out to studios all over the place, the volume and all that stuff. Yeah. They had to figure out how to make Star Wars acceptable for television within a reasonable budget. This is why George Lucas couldn't make Star Wars Underworld for all those years, and he put the scripts on the shelf. It's because he couldn't figure out a way to bring Star Wars. Yeah. And now they've done it, and people are so blown away by it. They're immediately making comparisons to what we see in these shows to major motion pictures, Star Wars and beyond. And I think that's a lot of credit for the production crews and the studios in general to be able to give us this sort of cinematic entertainment on a streaming show that's coming out weekly for 7 weeks. Now, so let's curb those expectations.
Then why do it though? Then why do it?
Then why do it? Okay, I don't mean to be an apologist. I'm not trying to be one here. When I watched that speeder chase first time, initial thoughts were some of the animation is herky and jerky, and overall the pacing seemed a little sluggish. To be an apologist, I'll say, well, they were driving through close quarters. I mean, you saw that the Major Domo's speeder could barely make it through some of those alleys. He was knocking out water towers and all sort of scaffolding and what have you. But it was weird. And those speeders, with the rainbow color, like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, is for a place like Mos Espa, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
It does. A little too
but
clean.
Again, it's the mod thing. That's what they're going for, is the mods on their multicolored Vespas riding around London in the mid-'60s, looking for rockers to fight with. And
they weren't trying to hide that, and that's the point. Like they're not.
The mods say, never did.
Exactly. That's my point. So for those that are saying, well, it looks, sort of off model for Tatooine, I think that's what they were going for. I mean, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that, it wasn't accidental is the point.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thought that was a way to, sink it in without people noticing. They want to be noticed.
And somebody said that in response to, well, these kids, they can't even afford water. How can they afford all these cybernetic implants and slick looking speeders? And the response was, well, I know a lot of people who always have the latest iPhones. They always have the best video games and home theater setup, but a lot of times they're struggling to pay their rent every month.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know a lot of people. Yeah. I know a lot of people that, or I shouldn't say know a lot of people, but I know of people, put it that way, that have a lot of tattoos, and those aren't cheap. And you're right, they've got the latest technology, but that they struggle to make ends meet. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. The other thing to keep in mind too is these could be kids of, middle class or even upper middle class families, but they themselves are struggling. There's no work. That's what they say. There's no work for them. And so Boba, he says, fine, you work for me. So they're working for him now.
I mean, they're trying to pay off their college loans and everything. There's no work. There's no work on Tatooine.
Hey, Big Steve in the house on the chat. Just got to give a shout out to Steve Glosson. I believe we had the great Steven Stanton also showing up there for a time. So
Steven
does he have he does a voice on one of the
episode 2, he voiced the leader of the Pykes.
Okay, so he should be showing
them after the plane thing. Here's another plug for Rancho Obi-Wan. I got the shirt on tonight. So
there you go. Wow, you're really waving the flag there for, as well you should, for Rancho Obi-Wan.
I don't even know what you're talking about, man. Waving what flag? I don't know.
Oh, I love it. Well, let's do this. I'd like to open up the phone lines here. Or start with the phone line. Wow! Oh my gosh! Okay, lots of people want to talk, Jim. We got a full roster of calls here already. Let's start with first time caller. We got Joel from Washington. Joel is on with Rebel Force Radio and our Boba Fett After Show. Hello. Thanks for your patience and waiting. Hey, Joel.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, chut, buddy.
Hey, man.
Hey, chut. How you guys doing?
All right, thanks.
Good. So, I've been hearing some of the gripes, and I feel the same about some of them. I'm just wondering why the show kind of feels half-baked. The action scenes this episode were great. Rodriguez's Mandalorian episode with Boba Fett was awesome. 3 episodes into this show now, and it feels like the writing is kind of lacking. Even some of the dialogue is not on par with what we had in The Mandalorian, and even the slow parts of Mandalorian still felt like they had better writing. But the things that are really doing it for me in the show, besides just the Easter eggs, are all the side characters. Like you guys said, we have Milton showing up. He's charging too much for water and probably staplers. Machete is showing up in the show, wrangling rancors. Matt Berry is doing his Stephen Toast voiceover work for a droid with Clem Fandango. I don't know if anyone gets that reference, but all these.
Who the hell is Matt Berry, by the way? I looked at that credit. Should we know who he is? He does the voice of 8D8. Who the hell is this guy? Matt Berry.
Yeah, he's a British actor, comedy. He has a show called The Toast of London, where he's like this actor who's trying to make it big. And there's an episode where they allude to the fact that he's going to get a part in the new Star Wars movie, and that was like 3 years ago, kind of like teleplaying what he's doing now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, they love comedians on this show, man. They love to cast comedians in all these roles. Everybody is a comedian.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that was just kind of my point is, if the Mandalorian's writing and dialogue can be what it was, why can't it be that way with this show?
All right. Well, let me ask you, Joel, because I don't know that I disagree with you, actually. I do think that it is. I think it's a bit of a step down. I think it is Burger King to McDonald's. I think it is Pepsi to Coke a little bit when you compare it to Mandalorian. No, I do. I don't think any reasonable person could say that this show so far has proven to be as good as the Mandalorian. It's just not. There's no way. But I want to ask you, why do you think that is? Is it Rodriguez? Is it too many steps away from Favreau Filoni? How do you explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's too many steps away from Favreau and Filoni. It's funny because I was comparing this episode to films of Rodriguez's. You know, seeing Danny Trejo show up, a fight scene, I was like, oh, this is perfect. But the rest of the dialogue, I don't know if he knows how to write Star Wars. You know, and it's
who's
like
he?
he's
Because
bringing so many
Favreau's the one
elements from
writing
other
it.
movies that he does.
Favreau's the one writing it, though.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah, but
Rodriguez is
wait,
directing it.
Is it both him and Filoni that are doing these ones?
Favreau's got the sole writing credit on every episode so far.
Okay. Well,
And,
maybe
and I
that's
don't,
it.
and I don't,
Maybe
and
that's
I'm not
just
throwing that at
comparing-
you like I'm not throwing that at you as like a gotcha, because I think I'm asking myself
Sure.
the same questions in my head as you're vocalizing, because I have wondered that. I don't have a big hang up with the dialogue. There was one little kind of cringy scene with that SCAD guy, and he's talking about his eye, and he's like, yeah, no offense taken, mate.
Right.
I'm proud of my eye. It's just like, a little
but
too.
even my son was saying that the heart of the show right now is those flashbacks.
Yeah.
You talk so much about like where's the old Boba Fett and is he going soft? Well, those flashbacks, that could just be the show in itself. But I get the fact that they're like, oh, we made a new Boba Fett. We have to show him a lot more. That backstory is the real heart. That's what we look forward to every single week in our house.
Interesting. That's really interesting that you say that, because for me, I'm enjoying and want to see more of what's going on in the most current timeline. You know, the stuff with the crime lord. Like, that's what I want to see more of. So
Yeah,
no,
and-
it's cool that two
like you said
different
last
households
week-
can look at the same show and want to see more of different things. But
I'm
yeah.
with the caller. I prefer the flashbacks because it's establishing who Boba is right after Return of the Jedi, who he becomes, and it will end up making these current day glimpses into him trying to establish himself as a crime lord make more sense at the end, when we can finally see the forest through the trees and understand what this entire story is all about. I think people are going to be saying different things about this series once you can see it all as a whole. And I also think the Star Wars fans are sending a message that they don't care much for Robert Rodriguez's work in Star Wars. That's something I've noticed. And I think
I don't know that I'm a
that's
fan
little-
either, to be honest with you. I don't know he
There's
has
a
an eye for
cartoony.
it.
Robert has a cartoony style, you know, and he always has.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And I think people are bristling against that a little bit. And also, you know, Robert Rodriguez himself was talking a big game before the show launched, and
Big
that
game.
may have actually put him behind the eight ball a little bit, because, you know, people are saying now, put your money where your mouth is, Robert. And I just get the feeling some fans are looking for something different. I'm not saying that I feel that way. This is just what I've observed.
Sure. And I think Jason makes a good point in the last 2 weeks. We could all be eating crow at the end of the series when we're saying, oh, this is why he is after he takes over from Bib Fortuna, is because everything that happened in these flashbacks, it's going to click.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a light bulb moment, and we'll be like, oh, we should have just shut up to begin with.
Yeah.
Just let the story emerge and let's go along for the ride. That's what I'm doing.
Great call,
And
Joel. Thank you very much.
That was a good call from Joel.
Appreciate
he had,
it.
some good things to say.
Call back again. We got another first-time caller and a Patreon. We appreciate that Patreon support. This is Mitchell calling in from Iowa. Hello, Mitchell.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Mitchell.
So I kind of want to go back a little bit to last week's episode and kind of partner off of what Jimmy was kind of saying, because it was kind of spot on from what I was kind of seeing with the kind of rebirth moments. But something that I haven't really seen or heard talked about is last week when he was having his lizard trip, when young Boba was looking into the mask of Jango, they kind of faded into old Boba being in the mask of Jango. And I think that was kind of a foreshadowing of, okay, if I live the same life that I'm leading, I'm going to have the same fate, and kind of showing that change in that as well.
Yeah.
So now that he's kind of had that, now that he's,
we saw that in the cave of Dagobah when Luke Skywalker beheaded the vision of Darth Vader and saw his own face behind the mask. It's the same message.
Yes.
And also, you know, Boba had another Luke Skywalker moment in this episode was when he crossed the dune and stood there and saw the Tatooine encampment burning. I was getting definite vibes of Luke watching the Lars homestead burn as he scanned the territory, saw the burning skeletons of his aunt and uncle there. I was getting similar vibes from that scene.
Yeah, that scene hit me. I thought it was pretty emotional. There was one shot in particular of Tam as Boba with the hood and the flickering flames on his face that reminded me of what we saw in episode 1 with the funeral pyre of Qui-Gon. Also, like you say, Luke and his father, or Luke with the Lars homestead. Yeah, it was very well done.
We saw a dewy-eyed Boba Fett.
I thought I might have saw a tear. You know,
I really think this episode represented some of Tamora Morrison's best acting in the series thus far in certain sequences. There have been other moments where Tim has left me wanting a little more from him as an actor.
I just want those chompers. I just want them big white chompers.
I've heard some people claim
that'll stick out in any setting.
I've heard some people claim they could see those teeth glistening behind the mask through the T-visor. They can spot his teeth in there. I think you're nuts, but maybe it's twin sons on Tatooine, so that's what makes.
You can just see the Disney exec looking across the conference room table at Tam, going, "I like this guy. I think he can carry a series. Can we just do something with the teeth? Can we get the teeth fixed? Hey, he got new teeth out of the deal. It was great.
Yeah, sure. Give me an advance on my salary, and I'll come in with chompers." But yeah, you know, the teeth, that's craziness. But what other observations do you have for us, caller?
So the next thing I kind of had was the beginning of the episode, the recap.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remind myself that I need to skip those, kind of like what I did with Mando, because just like Mandalorian, they're very good at kind of spoiling something that's going to happen in the episode. Yeah. They featured the Rancor pit coming back, and to myself, I immediately thought, okay, there's going to be a Rancor in here, and sure enough, there was. So that kind of stole a little bit of the luster for me.
Yep, I can see that. I agree. That's a good tip for those that are really looking to avoid all spoilers. Maybe skip the recap, because they do in a story that is this broad, has this big scope. They will kind of focus your attention on things that, and I see why. But no, that's a really great point.
I try not to even look at the thumbnail.
The thumbnail. Jim and I were talking about thumbnails all morning. It's hard because you know. Right. I mean, Disney used to be pretty good about putting up, a thumbnail from each episode. But there's been what I find challenging is that there's been so much that was seen in the trailers that we were supposed to have seen in the first half of the first episode.
First 15 minutes.
Yeah, first 15 that we haven't seen, and I keep thinking, well, maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll see it this episode. I don't know.
We still haven't seen the sit down with all those
crime
sit down,
bosses, right?
Which was in every trailer. And here we are, we're going into the 4th episode and we still haven't seen that. So Robert Rodriguez really destroyed his credibility in some of those preseason interviews. And I'm not saying that he has no credibility. I'm just saying there's some foot and mouth moments here.
Yeah, he might. Well, he's maybe not used to working. I mean, with Disney and Star Wars. I mean, that's he doesn't have the autonomy, I think, that he's probably used to with some of his other projects.
So he doesn't know half of the stuff he's talking about.
Filoni's probably like, hey, Robert, wait till you see the final episode. You won't even recognize it when it airs on there. You won't even, you'll be like, who directed that? That wasn't me.
He's throwing him curveballs left and right. Poor Robert Rodriguez. Is me and Swank, a couple guys who've been on the other end of some Filoni psychological warfare that he plays.
Yeah, right.
I really feel sympathy for Mr. Rodriguez right now. So.
Hey, thanks, Mitchell. Appreciate it. Hey, we got some super chats we want to get to. Let's see. This is Keith James. He says, Daimyo Boba and his modded spy kids. Laughing so hard he's crying on the emoji here. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my... It's not going to make my top 10 moments of Star Wars 2022.
See, again, look how people are reacting to Robert Rodriguez working on Star Wars. You know, he can't escape his past. He's saying the wrong thing in interviews. He's undergoing Filoni psychological warfare. I mean, he's just trying to make us happy.
It's a
folks,
disaster.
you know?
Skyrider says the candy-colored Vespas, that's what Jimmy was saying, Bike Gang and Geriatric Bike Chase were 99% wrong. Listen to your podcast regularly. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I agree about the bike chase. I think it's unforgivably bad. Unforgivably.
Well, no,
bad.
I forgive it. I am forgiving of that speeder bike chase. It felt a little clunky, and I just think, you know, those bright colors and all of that was just maybe too outside the realm for what we'd expect to see in Star Wars. Maybe on Coruscant, but not Tatooine.
You bring up a good point, though, earlier when you talked about the close quarters, and they were busy streets. There wasn't like big wide open lanes like you saw, you've seen in other Star Wars movies, or even in, you know, the speeder chase of Return of the Jedi, where they were, you know, in a forest. Yes, they were dodging trees. I get it, but however, even within that, you could have probably cut it in such a way that it would have built a little bit more intensity, which Star Wars is so known for.
Speed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they tried doing it. It just looked really goofy. And
here we go. Alex, hey guys, thoughts on Boba's porcelain veneers? His pearly whites really take me out of it. Anyway, love you guys. And Chut. Thanks, man. Yeah. I don't want to out him. Should I out him? But every time we get an email from our buddy Paul Bateman about Book of Boba Fett, Paul mentions the veneers every time. He's like, blessed him, love him, he's wonderful. But those veneers,
bloody pearly whites, blinding me, mates.
So yeah, you're definitely not the only one to notice. They are really out there. This is Mark Jerome. He says, I'm waiting for Boba to fly Slave One and hop into his back tub. Or maybe that's at his resort.
The Polynesian spa.
Yeah, Jim, when do you think we're going to see Slave One? We're almost halfway through this.
He has to reacquire the Slave One.
So it's not hanging out. We suspected it was at in Jabba's palace, in one of the hangars. He'd have found it by now.
Right.
It's not there.
Yeah, if he just parked it out in the middle of the desert somewhere. I think he's got it parked in Jabba's palace. As a matter of fact, I think one of the promo clips revealed him walking into a docking bay where the Slave One is parked. So I think...
you think he already has it?
Oh, no. Now he's riding around a Bantha.
Well, right. So that's what I'm saying. So what you're saying, but wouldn't he already have it?
By the time, he definitely has it by the time we see him trying to establish himself as a crime lord in Mos Espa.
I see.
And all the current day stuff. We saw him flying it all over the place in The Mandalorian.
Right.
Yeah, he definitely had it by that point. But how does he go about getting it back? I think that might be part of the problem he ends up having with Bib Fortuna.
Right.
Or it could be Bib is working with these Nikto speeder bikes, the Kintans, or is it Kintin or Kintan?
It's spelled Kintan. So Kintin, Kintin or Kintan.
Yeah. So the speeder bike, the Nikto speeder gang, I think might be on Bib's payroll. And when Boba finally connects those dots, that's why he then walks in and shoots Bib Fortuna. But there could have been some time after Boba got the Slave One when he finally discovers that Bib was paying off the Niktos. I think Boba gets the Slave One. It's hard to say. He definitely has it by the time he starts tracking the Mando. By the time the Mando leaves Tatooine, we know Boba Fett has the Slave One. Right. So I think it's safe to assume he had already had it. But still yet at that time, despite having the Slave One at his disposal, he still lets Cobb Vanth walk around Mos Pelgo wearing his Mandalorian armor.
Right.
See, I think the thing is Mandalorian armor is really hard to take off of someone unless they're, left for dead in the sands of Tatooine. That's the only way you can get it off the guy. I mean, you try messing with a guy who has Mandalorian armor on, and Boba Fett has a stick and a blaster, and that's it. And mad fighting skills that have only been enhanced by his proximity to the Tuskens, but also Boba has not had access to the Bacta tank yet. That doesn't even happen until Book of Boba Fett.
If you're keeping score, he calls it a Bacta tank rather than a Bacta tube. And we
pod.
thought
we called it pod.
Yeah, we called it a pod. Right. So he's calling it a tank.
He called it a pod in the first episode after he got beat up in Mos Espa.
Now it's a tank.
The Gamorreans, take me back to the pod.
Yeah.
But now he calls it a tank. Tank, pod, who cares? We have a lot of interchangeable terms for appliances here on planet Earth. So, I mean, he can call it a pod, he can call it a tank, he can call it whatever the hell he wants to. Canister, container.
Right.
He could call it the spa at the Polynesian.
Thanks to the Becker fam for the super chat. Appreciate it, guys. Glad you're all watching and enjoying, hopefully, this show. John Warren says, if you listen close, you can hear the mods guy say, Go Gadget foot knife.
Get out of here. That's Inspector Gadget. That's not
always true. On duty, Chief. Yeah. That's funny. I like that. Let's see what else we got here. Unsourced Wall Radio says, I am kind of whatever on the Street Gang, but I did like how prequel era they felt. The whole series so far seems to vibe with the prequel era. Okay. I could see maybe some. What was the Outlander Club? Maybe a little bit of that going on.
Okay. I think this show is doing a good job of bridging all the trilogies, really, because we get so many of the classics. We have Rhodians, Trandoshans, Hutts, Walrus Men. Who am I leaving out? The Klatooinians, the Niktos. We have so many classic creatures, but then some of those sequel creatures are sprinkled in there too, like the Pykes, and in that weird wolfman that was walking around in Maz Kanata's castle. We've seen one of his species walking around Mos Espa for sure. The Twi'leks everywhere. Here's an interesting question. I brought this up to Wendy actually in a conversation because she has done some work in radio with David Pasquale, the guy who plays the Major Domo. And she says, she loves him. He's a wonderful guy. Yeah. He's Chicago based. He's from the Chicago area. He's got background with the Second City and Steppenwolf Theater. He's got mad credentials. He's a comedian. He does a lot of comedy work. And Wendy has worked with him in the past. And I said, fans are really just not digging him. They really have an issue with him. And she said, well, what is the issue? What is the issue, Jason? Can you tell me? Because you've been pretty vocal about it.
I have. I think that his performances are too subtle. They're too he's too Michael Mercy said last week, I think it's a good word, glib. Just too modern in his style of performance, whereas I feel that Star Wars is very almost classical in its style. He just seems out of place. He seems too modern, too real world.
Yeah, but I mean, is there anything? Here's what Wendy presented to me. She said, "Well, what's so different about his performance compared to that of Jennifer Beals?" She doesn't seem to be putting on any sort of exotic flair or displaying any sort of accent or, I mean, she seems very, very planted on, feet down on planet Earth.
Fair point. I would suggest that the difference is we haven't heard as much from her as we've heard from David as the Major Domo. So
the comparisons were being made from the first episode, though, where she clearly had more screen time than he did.
Not as much dialogue.
He was only in that one brief scene.
Yeah, but she didn't have much dialogue at all.
Yeah, I guess
but she's not knocking my socks off. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh man, Jennifer Beals. Now that's Star Wars, like we were saying with with Danny Trejo. I think Wendy
Trejo.
I think that's because he's just so he
has such a look.
He has such a look, right? He's that guy that you go, oh my God, that guy. I think Wendy has a great point. I think Wendy has a very fair point.
She brought that up, and I just said, well, I think people aren't complaining about Jennifer Beals because she's beautiful, but
they hate her because she's a woman.
Pasquale's that never was mentioned. Pasquale's character is designed to be reprehensible. He's designed for us to hate him. He's
all right. I got another theory for you. All right, here's another theory. And this has been percolating on our private Jedi Council emails, is that after seeing Bib Fortuna established in the live-action Star Wars universe, yeah, very exotic. I don't want to name names, but a member of our Jedi Council said, these guys exist in the same... Bib Fortuna, Return of the Jedi, Bib Fortuna exists in the same universe as this Major Domo, and they're the same species? Like, just doesn't quite work. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe if he was like Burger Chef, the City Hall clerk, where he was just a human, I wouldn't be as harsh. But I expect the Twi'lek to be much more exotic, and particularly in the live action universe. But you pointed out, Jim, I think last week, like, we've just been Twi'lek to death through Star Wars Rebels, and in Clone Wars, from the Syndulas to you name it.
Yeah, Hera wasn't exotic or
no, she wasn't.
She was very ordinary. Now, Xi'an, who was part of Bill Burr's gang in season 1 of the Mandalorian,
right? Now,
while she didn't speak Huttese or anything, she had exotic qualities about her.
The sharp teeth.
She would just she had the sharp teeth, and she would get in the Mando's face, and just be really weird,
Yeah.
So, she had it too. But yeah, we're not getting that so much in Book of Boba Fett for whatever reason. Maybe it's an accessibility issue where they just want to get a point across a lot faster. But then a lot of people say, just my argument, hey, they don't have the budget for this and that and the other thing. Then people say, well, why should they even try then? But, there are some things I think that are elemental to Star Wars. And, would you say that to George Lucas back in 1975? Hey, well, if you can't afford it, why are you even trying?
Hey, and there were a lot of things. Star Wars. And we know, because Star Wars struck such a chord, the original in 1977. Jim, you're no stranger to this. People have been talking about what does and what doesn't feel like Star Wars since 1980, when Empire Strikes Back came out. So it's not a new question.
Believe it or not, for as revered as the character Yoda is to this day, back in May 1980, people were saying, "What's this Muppet doing in Star Wars?" It took me out of it. It was Grover from Sesame Street. Took me out of it. Flipping Fozzie Bear, man. Took me out of it.
Hey, if Fozzie Bear can show up in Star Wars, so can Danny Trejo.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know.
I get your point. As flawed as it may be in the presentation, I understand, Swank, what you're saying. If you try doing something like that again, I'm going to feed you to the menagerie, okay?
Please do. All right, back to the phones we go. We've got first-time caller and a Patreon supporter, Chris from Florida. Hey, Chris, you're on with Rebel Force Radio. Thanks for hanging out.
Hey, Chut, guys. Thanks for having me.
Buddy. Of course. Hey, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, one of the things I want to comment on with this show, and really what I've really enjoyed with both of these shows, Book of Boba Fett and with Mandalorian, is I'm just so surprisingly blown away with the music.
Hardly
for
noticed
the longest time, that's what I'm saying. For the longest time, I thought a sacred cow in Star Wars was John Williams. That when John Williams' music wasn't present, it just wasn't Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And what's impressed me is that with Ludwig Göransson's score, present in both of these shows, and each very unique, it hasn't taken me out of it being Star Wars. It's really added a unique flair to the street level storytelling of Star Wars, and not just the grand Skywalker saga epic that, what we kind of associate with John Williams. But he had a unique twist on Mandalorian where it kind of added that samurai Western vibe to it. And with this one, the way he adds the vocals towards the end credits, I kind of get that lone warrior tribal vibe. I don't know. It's just something that I noticed and that I really appreciated.
Are they putting the with Mando? I think didn't they put the soundtrack or they put clips online? Of the score. Are they doing that with Boba?
Not yet. They did release the main theme, which I don't know if that was released legitimately or not, because our friend sent it to me and I never went out searching for it. I have to admit, when I first heard it, I didn't like it at all. I was like, dum da da dum da da dum da da dum. I was like, what the hell am I listening to? But then within the context of the show, I mean, it's like, oh, this is perfect. It fits in naturally. It fits in naturally.
Yeah.
And so I mean, that's not uncommon for me to experience something like that. Most recently with the latest James Bond movie, which I know is just as divisive among the James Bond fan bases as Boba Fett can be with the Star Wars fan base. But I mean, maybe that's just the nature of being a fan in 2022. There's constant division, there's constant friction. You know why? Because we live in the age of opinion.
Sure.
We live in the age of opinion.
Everybody's a critic. Everybody has a platform.
The more that we can learn to work with other people's opinions and accept them into our own realm, our own headcanon, while still remaining true to our own integrity, that's where I think the end goal is with all of this age of information and opinion being thrown at you left and right. You can't go anywhere without knowing what people think. And I think that sort of tempers people's approach to the show, and it might be something that is spreading out throughout franchises everywhere. We live in the age of the franchise. We live in the age of the opinion. I mean, it sounds like the perfect storm to me. So, so I get it. But with the music, the James Bond theme that was recently done by Billie Eilish, when I first heard that, I'm like, this sucks. But then when I saw it in the context of the film, I was like, oh, it fits in naturally. It's great. It's perfect. Those are just the type of things, we typically, I find it's best to go through that whole experience with an open mind and not go into it going, I already hate the theme song, so I know the show is going to suck.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are kind of trained to react that way. And that's putting us in a weird place as fans. I think we really have to trust our gut and say it loud and say it proud. When you like something other people don't like, don't be afraid of it.
No. This is all friendly conversation, but I do appreciate the thought, Chris, on the music. Thanks for drawing our attention to it, because I don't think that it gets as much attention as it deserves. And I actually dig the theme song quite a bit, honestly, and we always are humming it after it goes off the air. Let's see, we got any more? Oh, we got another first-time caller. This is Robert calling in from South Carolina. Hello, Robert. You're on with Rebel Force Radio, Boba Fett After Show, the Streets of Mos Espa.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, I wanted to talk about Jabba's territory.
Yeah.
In this episode, at the beginning, AD-8 shows them on the holomap all the businesses that owe the previous Jabba tributes, is what they call them.
Yeah. His vassals, I guess. Uh-huh.
And talking with Tyler, I was reminded of, isn't it in the Clone Wars movie, the whole thing is that the Jedi need permission from Jabba to move through Hutt space?
That's correct. Right.
And it seems like in the show they're kind of narrowing the focus down to even one city, because Boba at one point, I think, to the water guy, he says, like, if you don't like my offering, take it to Mos Eisley. So I'm just kind of confused on what the scope of Jabba's power was at the time at the end of Return of the Jedi.
That's a really good question. That's a good point. So what we know from the Clone Wars is that they were going to Jabba to get permission through Hutt space. Now that's not through Tatooine. right? We know that Tatooine is not in Hutt space. So,
well, I wasn't even talking about geographically.
Okay.
I was talking about the scope of his power.
oh, the scope of his power. I would say, yeah, no, I think it's a good question to bring up. I would suggest that in addition to Jabba being a formidable crime figure and staking his home base on Tatooine, he obviously carried a lot of influence within the Hutts themselves. So if you got in good with Jabba, then you were almost assured to get what you wanted out of the Hutts at large. Again, just my thinking there. Jabba was maybe the most influential, maybe was the most, maybe influential is not the right word. I mean, maybe he's the most apt to accept bribes, I don't know.
He was like the head of the 5 families.
Or was he the head of the 5? I don't know that he was. Was he?
But if he was the head of the 5, well, this is my saying, is that Book of Boba Fett shows a couple businesses that paid him tribute. And that's what Boba Fett it's focused on. Not if he's the head of the 5 family. I mean, even the Pykes, when the twins go to Boba and they said war is bad for business, they're not talking about going to war with Boba Fett. They're talking about going to war with the Pykes.
Yes.
All roads in the seems like it's going to go to the Pykes.
Yeah.
Because the Pykes are the ones that are actually responsible for the deaths of the Tuskens, not that biker gang. Because Boba Fett went to the Pykes on Tatooine and said, you know, like, I'll get rid of these guys. Either the Pykes had the same conversations with the biker gang, but more obvious, I think that the biker gang is probably just an arm on Tatooine for the Pykes.
Yeah,
because that's who gets off the transport and they end of the it seems like the focus is going to go towards them.
Yeah,
and that's who the twins didn't want to fight, not Boba Fett.
Yeah, no, that's a real good point about the Pykes, because I was wondering that myself. So, you know, Boba basically goes to the Pykes and says, hey, you owe us protection money. We're going to let you cross the Dune Sea. We're not going to have a repeat of the raid on the speeder train like we had before. And he's like, yeah, I'd love to pay you, but I'm already paying this other group. I'm already paying these Clatoonians. And he goes, yeah, we'll take care of them.
The Niktos.
Or, sorry, the Niktos. Yeah. And by the time he gets back, you know, by way of Bantha, I don't know how fast the Bantha, walks, the tribe's already wiped out. So Robert is really smart to point out that, very well could have been the Pykes that gave the heads up to the Niktos, and, they drew first blood. So he's got a score to settle in both storylines here, with the Pykes.
Or it's the mayor. The mayor is the guy who is, he's kicking back to the Pykes. And then the mayor might also have that biker gang under his thumb. I think we're going to see the mayor meet his gruesome end before season 1 is over, because it seems like he's dipping his hands into, way too many different situations here.
Right. Hey, let's talk to, we got to talk to David. David from California. Poor guy has COVID right now. David, how you doing, man?
Chut, boys.
Chut. You hanging out with us while you're in quarantine?
Yeah, why not, right? It's like work at home, watch Boba Fett 2 or 3 times during the day, listen to all the podcasts about the reviews and stuff.
Are you like Jimmy Mack was? Are you sequestered down in the basement, away from the family for a few days?
Nope, wife, kids, we all got it.
Oh, you all got it. All right, so you're all just sharing the wealth there together. All right, well,
and we got it at Galaxy's Edge. So, it's like we were at Galaxy's Edge when we got sick.
Are you sure it was COVID and it wasn't some sort of like
the blue shadow virus?
Bad Ronto raps, man.
Oh, man. Well, hey, in all seriousness, hope you and the whole family are doing all right. You doing okay?
Thanks. Yeah, we're good. It feels like a cold. So, But, the previous caller stole my thunder a little bit, but I appreciate it. I'm glad there's more people seeing this. The character arc of Boba, you could tell from the first episode, he's personally has some consternation or some resistance to the idea of being the daimyo. He doesn't really know what he's doing. And I don't know if it's purposely built into the story that this has been an underhanded move by him this whole time to get revenge, but this is going to end up being, the convergence of this is going to end up being a story of vengeance against the Pykes. People who are excited to potentially see Kira and stuff, I don't know if that's going to happen. I think this is going to be, Boba was this guy. He turned into this guy. This guy finally got things he didn't have as a child. You see all these flashbacks of Slave One leaving, and he felt, displaced, didn't have a family, doesn't know his own history, all these kinds of things other than, his dad, the bounty hunter, is out tromping around the universe. And, the Tuskens really became that for him. Now, they probably could have developed that story a little bit more, too, but I think what's going to end up happening is he's going to look at this. And even, I think that scene of them sitting around the table will probably be next week, because he's going to have to start to amass some people to support his efforts against the Pykes. But for him, he has that line with Black Krrstantan where he says, "We're sorry, now he's just Krrstantan," appropriately,
right?
Where he says it was just business. And I think, actually, when I thought about that, I think he struggles with that idea now that this is going to be just business. And I think now it's going to be a big shift to the personal. And we're going to see this concerted effort for vengeance. And it might be cloaked in all this other stuff, right? You might just continue the crime lord thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, episode 5 or 6 or something, he turns to Fennec and says, this is now personal. I have to tell you what happened to me. And something happens, and he goes after the Pykes as more of a vendetta type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to point out that the Pykes are a linchpin in this whole thing. Obviously, we see them bubble up in the sort of the Tusken storyline, and then obviously in the storyline with him as crime lord too. So, hey, David, thanks for calling, man. Hope everything works out well for you. Hope you and the family bounce back from all this. Sounds like you're doing all right with it. Appreciate the call. Thanks for hanging out with us.
The Pykes, I think that the reason that they're in play in the current storyline is because it all comes out of that attack on the train and the shakedown for money.
Right,
and
right.
Now
protection racket.
And word has gotten to the Pykes that Boba is now the sitting crime lord in Jabba's palace, trying to exert influence over Mos Eisley. And so now they're like, well, he took his revenge on us. We're going to take our revenge on him. Right. And that's why there's many layers to all of this stuff. And while it's true that the Pykes are troublesome, I think that the Crimson Dawn might come into this a little bit. They might be the muscle behind the Pykes.
Yeah, the Crimson Dawn, that's been something that's been on my mind, and I think on the mind of a lot of fans is, could they be, because it's hard to imagine. Yeah, I guess you could conceive of where the Pykes are the big bad of of this season, and they deal with them. But is there something more behind it? We're always looking what's like in the sequel trilogy, we kept looking for are the roads going to lead back to Palpatine? Are the roads going to where do these roads lead back to? And Jim, are you suggesting that maybe there's a cut deeper than the Pykes?
Yeah, because the Pykes are who they are and everything, but they have the mayor of Mos Espa under their thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that they have to have more muscle to be able to get him to leave his office and go off with them, and basically leave his post to go off with them and to conspire to go to war against Boba Fett and whatever syndicate he has. The thing that was revealed by the Pike, by the twins, was that Jabba's territory has been granted to someone else by Mok Shays.
Yes.
They say his name 100 different times too.
Right.
Mok Shays, Mok Shais,
right.
They say it a million. But so obviously I think they're talking about the Pykes.
Right.
And so now Boba is really digging himself out of a hole. It's like everyone's against the guy, and he doesn't necessarily have the muscle to stand up against it. So it's this is where I think back to the comments that you were referring to by the producers saying, Boba's in over his head
right
in this situation. And it's interesting to see the pushback from Fennec, the pushback from even the droid 88. They want more out of Boba. And Boba just isn't providing it right now. I think Boba's trying to build his muscle via loyalty. And so he got the Gamorreans that way. He got Fennec Shan that way. He's going to get Krrstantan that way. And he has the Tuskens that way too. The Tusken story is not done with.
Yeah.
Trust me on that. They will show up in the current storyline.
Well, the question I have though, Jim, is we haven't seen any connection between Boba's tribe of Tuskens and other Tuskens, right? So his tribe is wiped out. So what he's going to have to do is establish credibility. It very well could be his gaffy stick, something that's going to be an instant, recognizable symbol of credibility to other Tusken tribes, because he's not going to have to start all over. He can't start all over again, right?
Well, there must be some line of communication between these Tusken tribes, because Boba says that we outnumber the Pykes, when he's talking about the Tuskens. Or maybe he says that about the speeder biking. No, he does. He says that about the Nictus. Definitely they have more than... he was trying to say that they had more muscle in the desert than the Nictus. Why are you kicking back to them when we can offer you all the protection you need? So that's why he goes off to talk to the Nictus, and that will be resolved maybe next week. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But again, the Nictus are probably on the payroll of the Pykes themselves, and the Pykes themselves are under the control of the mayor, and the mayor himself is on the payroll for the Crimson Dawn, most likely. So it's like many layers.
Okay,
many
that's
layers.
where you're pulling Crimson Dawn. You think that they're pulling the strings of the mayor, perhaps?
Yes.
More super
but I do
chats.
think those tribes communicate, because in The Mandalorian season 1, episode 5, or I should say chapter 5, when the Mando and Toro, was that his name? The bounty hunter wannabe that the Mando met in the Mos Eisley Cantina. His name was like Toro Calican or something like that. They go off on speeder bikes in search of Fennec Shan.
Yes.
And they come across some Tuskens, clearly from a different tribe. They looked more like your traditional Tuskens we've seen in the films and whatnot. But those Tuskens demand a toll for Boba and Toro to cross the Dune Sea. And so as a result, Mando gives them Toro's micro binocs. Hey, they're brand new. And he gives it to them. And so they're able to cross. So the idea of taking toll from people, non-Tuskens, to cross the Dune Sea has been established and has spread around to other tribes. It's interesting to see that was kept alive despite the massacre of Boba's Tusken camp.
I want to get to some more of these super chats. This is from David. He says, I'm looking forward to Boba losing his mind in retribution on the Nikto bikers in the next flashback scene. Love the podcast. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. I'm looking forward to that too. They leave their mark. They have that symbol that they leave, and that's the reason why we saw Boba Fett watching the raid on that homestead a couple episodes ago, where the Nikto bikers put the symbol on the outside of the house there. So now we know who that is, and he is going to go. I think he's going to go full on brutal Boba with that.
The biggest difference between this show and The Mandalorian is that with The Mandalorian, he would go on these missions, right?
Yeah,
and those episodes typically had a beginning, a middle, and an end to them, and they were really much more self-contained. There was a thread running through the seasons and through each episode, but it wasn't dominating each episode. The situations that the Mando would find himself in, having to deliver Frog Lady somewhere and having to try to find. I mean, that was all kind of in the background compared to the challenges that were presenting himself episode by episode. The goal was to deliver the Frog Lady, but they got trapped on an ice planet. So that became then the core of the episode. And that was the main adventure. So the big picture story didn't matter so much in each episode of The Mandalorians. It was
and you either loved that
thread.
Or you didn't like that. It seemed like as we were listening to, other fans calling in and talking about that.
This series, not so much. This series is continual. Each episode plays off the one right before it, and that is the primary focus of the episodes, are the big picture situation that Boba is going through, and it's being told both past and present. So it's a vastly different format than what
very
we got
much
in
so.
The Mandalorian.
Very much so.
Yeah, and that might be challenging to some people who live in the age of on-demand everything and need to binge everything like they're heroin addicts. It's you need to display a little more patience when dealing with a show that comes out week to week. And then what's so great about it is the conversations that it generates. Like the last 2 hours we've been here behind these mics talking about this episode with our callers. This is the stuff I live for. We lose all this if they drop entire seasons at once. Would the season maybe play out better for you to see it all at once? Maybe.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on who you are. I know if they released the Book of Boba Fett as a single season, they dropped it on a Friday or something, I wouldn't leave the house until I saw every episode. I mean, because I'm so hardcore Star Wars, I can't be casual about it. And I know I would do that, but we would miss all the nuanced conversations that go on between each episode and the fun in trying to speculate. And, a lot of this stuff has a short shelf life. I saw a comment today. Somebody had gone and they'd finally seen our first after show for Book of Boba Fett, and they're like, wow, that show didn't age well. And I'm like, well, I mean, we're just trying to speculate and
just simple men trying to make our way in the universe is what we're doing.
Just trying to make educated guesses and having fun doing it, and that's all it is.
That's right.
Yeah, I hate the full season dumps. I just despise them, and I don't.
Disney doesn't seem to be into that at all.
No, thank God.
Whereas
Netflix does it, and they green light every piece of crap that comes across their desk just because they need to keep filling content.
Yeah, but you never get a season 2 of anything, I feel like, with Netflix.
Nothing, ever. Their model is flawed, and Netflix is going to go either belly up or they're going to adapt to a weekly schedule of releasing stuff. I predict that we will see the death of binging seasons.
Yeah, very well could be.
Released.
Very well could be. I mean, look at Cobra Kai, which is one of the biggest successes that they've had, and that got established on YouTube before it went over to Netflix. So, all right, here's Ryan Blue Thunder says, I just want to know what SPF that Swoop Bike girl uses. Her skin should be leather. Yeah, she's a little pasty. She's a proper British gal, Sophie Thatcher as Drash.
She's from Chicago.
Oh, what? She is?
Chicago. Yeah.
Oh, what?
So we're pasty here. We're pasty here too. Come on, don't.
Didn't she have an accent?
It might be put on, but
yeah, okay. I
did
not
Chicago.
know she was from Chicago. Wow.
The character might be British.
Wow.
But
all right.
British, from the British side of Tatooine, of course.
Wazit Gear says, I wish I could go to Toys R Us and find a dedicated Boba Fett toy line with figures, creatures, and vehicles. I miss the old days. Dude, you're reading my mind and also the mind of a good friend of mine who has been texting me the last couple of weeks saying, why can't I, it sounds like me with Mandalorian, why can't I walk into a toy store and knowing what the top shows, on TV, on streaming are, and buy toys? So true. So true. We could do a whole show about it. Maybe we will at some point. But what is it with the synchronicity or the lack of synchronicity between Hasbro and Lucasfilm to where we're not getting this stuff? And we know some of it's being made. A lot of it's available for pre-order. But yeah, should you be able to walk in 3 weeks into this series and buy a Boba Fett action figure as he looks in the TV, in the Book of Boba Fett, at Target, at Walmart, at Toys R Us if you're in Canada? Absolutely. It's ridiculous that you can't.
I think I'm going to get a Boba Fett action figure shipped pretty soon here. That deluxe figure that they just
is it shipping now?
Yeah, I received a notification that something's coming in the mail here.
Okay.
I'm
Hopefully
not sure
that's
if
it.
that's the actual action figure. If I have it, I'll show it off here on the.
Remember the
show
days though,
week.
Jim, when a big show would come out or a big movie would come out, and you'd walk into Toys R Us and that whole front display would be nothing but action figures and vehicles and I mean.
A big part of my life.
Right.
Star Wars, I mean, for crying out loud. It's just, you hear the same old crap all the time. Kids don't play with toys anymore. Well, guess what you can do? Pivot toward the adult collectors then, and we'll give you all the money you want. I don't care if kids are playing with toys or not. Give it to the adult collectors. Kids are staring at screens. Give them the screens. Give me the action figures. Enough said.
We're going to wrap things up here in just a few minutes, but I do want to take this call. Also a Patreon first-time caller from Tennessee, a big Robert Rodriguez fan calling in. So, Brad from Tennessee, you're on. Help us understand what's going on with Robert Rodriguez. Is he a good contributor, creator with Star Wars, or what?
Okay, here's my argument, guys. I think, first of all, I love you both, but I want to say that this concept is based on the idea that he's a direct conduit from George. I mean, I didn't have kids. I'm a little too young for that. But at the time when the Spy Kids movies were coming out, and then all the press was about how Robert Rodriguez was taking all the tech from George, and all the articles in Insider about Robert Rodriguez has visited the set. And he took that and he made his own Austin studio, and he made all the movies like the Shark Boy and Lava Girl and all the things. But he also did like the Planet Terror and the other genre movies based on the concept of what George was doing. My take on the final race in this episode, the speeder chase, is essentially like an old Pink Panther movie. Like, I know Robert Rodriguez loves the cartoons and the slapstick, but I also know that he loves Peter Sellers' old Pink Panther movies. And this, to me, is like classic Blake Edwards car chase, where you got the old man at the vineyard and he's got a bottle of wine and he's trying to cross the street, but all these cars keep zipping in his way. And then there's a guy in the zebra suit, two guys in the zebra suit, and they're trying to follow each other in the middle of the highway without getting hit by a car. That's what I felt this was. More of like a comic take.
Like Keystone
George
Cops.
would have
No,
done,
I get it. I love the Pink Panther films too. I wasn't aware that, first of all, I wasn't aware that Robert Rodriguez was such a student of Lucas and such a fan of Lucas, much less of Blake Edwards in those Pink Panther movies. It does make sense. It's a little slapsticky, which some people, don't like, and they don't like in Star Wars. So you're saying that it in terms of Robert Rodriguez's aesthetic, this makes total sense.
I feel like it does, from the, like you were saying before, the cartoony aspect of it. I feel like it was one of those things in the behind the scenes of Mandalorian season 2, where he's doing his animatics with action figures and his kids in the suits and everything. That to me felt like an offshoot of that idea where, like, maybe just like in Mandalorian season 1 and 2, the third episode seemed to be a bit of a lull in the dramatic arc. But, Jason, you deal with dramas all the time. You deal with theater, and you know that the dramatic arc between the act 1, 2, and 3 is something that has to have dynamics. And I feel like maybe act 3 was something where this was the comic relief to a bit of a eat your oats episode.
So maybe we were taking it a little.
To the action.
What I think, Brad, maybe what you're saying is we're taking it a little bit too seriously. Maybe this was meant to be lighthearted. It was meant to be comic relief. It wasn't. We weren't supposed to watch this and say, "Wow, man!" In the annals of high-speed hijinks in Star Wars, this was in the top 5. that really wasn't the intention.
It's only because of only because of the dude that was in charge of the chase, which is the Major Domo, who's the big goofball of the series, and he's like Stu, the meat guy from the Amy Sedaris show, Strange with the Candy. So I feel like the comedy
that's probably how he got the gig.
Guy leading the chase. Yeah,
I'm glad you brought up that reference to the Amy Sedaris show, because obviously Amy Sedaris is Pelimoto, who we got a glimpse of in the background of that scene.
I saw it. She was walking with the droids, right?
Yeah, that was clearly Pelimoto.
Yeah,
and I also thought it was cool that we actually got to see those stormtrooper helmets actually being placed on the spikes, because it kind of gives us an indication that the Empire has still just recently fallen.
Right.
And that is the case, as far as the timeline goes for Star Wars. But David Pasquale was on the Amy Sedaris show up until, is that show still on, or did it wrap up like a year and a half ago or something?
I don't think it's still on. No, I think it's been
I don't think it's still on either. It was on, but he was on that show for like 4 years. And I can't help but think that she may have helped recruit him into Star Wars via her connection with the Mandalorian,
right?
Pelimoto.
And she's been somewhat controversial. I think she grew on fans there with subsequent appearances, but that first initial one, people were like, oh, it took me out of it. Didn't feel like Star Wars. Brad from Tennessee, though, that was a great call. We do want to wrap things up, but we got to get through our remaining super chats. Thank you all so much. You've been so generous tonight. By the way, I want to just make a note. Yes, we make sure that if you send a super chat, it gets on the screen. We address it, but it's not the only comments that we're looking at. We're looking at all of the comments. So I don't want you to think that if it's not a super chat that we're ignoring it. We're certainly not. We're looking at all of them. TJRC says, I also forgive the speeder chase, Jimmy, but I note that it requires forgiveness. So saying, yeah, okay, I forgive it, but it does require forgiveness.
That's very true. I do note that it requires forgiveness. There's no question about it.
Real quick here, by the way, we've got right now we're looking at over 500 people watching this and listening right now. Could you please give a thumbs up? That really does help out the channel. For those of you that are new and you just know us through YouTube, we're Rebel Force Radio. We're the #1 Star Wars podcast in the world. And so you can subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and all those places. But the YouTube thing is a great way to do these live shows, and also a way to promote the podcast. So what we'd love to have you do, if you're not freaked out by Jimmy's creepy encroachment of 8D8 vintage Kenner action figure, please hit the like button. Come on, we got over 500 of you watching right now. Please click the like button. It really does help us out, helps us grow. Why not? Why shouldn't the #1 Star Wars podcast also have the most YouTube subscribers as well? So subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when we're going to go live. Here's another super chat. This is from Nivi Kobar 117. Couldn't the Pykes presence be a part of a bigger picture that brings the Mandalorian, Boba Fett, and Bo-Katan all coming together for a fight to return to Mandalore? The Pykes.
Yeah, I like him.
Ah, okay. Now we're getting there. Yeah, we're thinking big picture here.
Looking ahead, I mean, obviously, according to what Kathleen Kennedy said when she announced the upcoming slate for Star Wars programming back at the end of 2020, she said that the events of Ahsoka, The Mandalorian, well, she didn't say the Book of Boba Fett yet because the show had not been announced, but I assume it all comes under the Favreau-verse.
Filoni-verse.
The Filoni
People call it the Filoni-verse, but yeah, but you're right.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean,
I agree.
This is Jon Favreau's thing.
It's Jon Favreau.
Right. Dave is riding shotgun with this, but John is the one calling all the shots here. And John is the one who has the Hollywood clout to be able to get this stuff done.
Maybe we call it Favloni-verse.
Favloni. But, that it's all supposed to lead to some grand finale somehow, some big event that's going to happen.
Could be a film.
Well, I think smart money says it should be a film because this is the only direction Star Wars is heading in right now.
Right.
We have the Taika Waititi film, yes, and the Kevin Feige film, yes. But, I mean, there's been barely a buzz about those, and we know that they're probably half on the chopping block to begin with, after what we saw happening with Rogue Squadron and all the other things that go on. What is the one thing that has really helped Lucasfilm keep their head above water in the wake of the sequel trilogy? Well, it's these streaming shows for crying out loud. Yeah. This is the future of Star Wars, and I believe it should move up to the silver screen. That way we can get some decent speeder chases through Mos Espa, for crying out loud. We need a film budget.
Speaking of which, we got Garrett here. He says, my problem with the speeder bikes is how clean they are for being on Tatooine. Also, don't forget, Jimmy called it that the Tuskens would be wiped out. That's right, Jim, you did call it Tuskens wiped out. We thought we might see a relationship between Boba and the Armorer. We thought there might be a romance or something there, but man, I was surprised. I was surprised that it was just like, boom. I was as surprised as Boba himself, I think, that the Tuskens were wiped out this episode.
Too.
Yeah,
I was really starting to settle in with those folks.
Yeah.
And, I could drink black melons with those guys all day, but it's, it was sudden, and it's a shift for these flashbacks for sure. And I figured Boba would need some inspiration, some motivation, a motivating factor for returning, taking himself back, put himself back on the grid and part of a big power struggle scene. And I think, just like the massacre of the Tuskens done at the hands of Anakin Skywalker pushed him toward the dark side. Now we're seeing the massacre of the Tuskens from like another perspective.
Yeah.
And understand what the fallout of this is going to be like on a guy like Boba Fett. So I think there's some real good poetic justice there being served up here by Lucasfilm. And I dig it a lot. I just can't help but think getting to know the Tuskens really make Anakin's massacre of that camp so significant of his slide to the dark side. And we've always understood it was, but we could never feel sympathy for the Tuskens ever until now.
Yeah.
Now we have, you brought it up earlier. We were able to feel sympathy for the Rancor just by seeing how his keeper was weeping over the loss of his pet. So you felt a layer of sympathy for him there. With the Tuskens, we never had that before.
Right.
Except Kevin H. in Seattle, who in the super chat says he had feels for the Tuskens. Now, I don't know if he means before Book of Boba Fett or when they got slaughtered. I think he means when they got slaughtered in this show. And Kevin's a great guy. He's a Patreon member. I suggest all you guys support us on Patreon because we release so much content there that you can't get anywhere else. Exclusive podcasts, full show video. You, even as a Patreon contributor, have a chance to host a show with me called RFR Q&A. And we just celebrated 100 episodes of the Q&A. Can you believe it? Somebody pointed out to me, gosh, most podcasts don't even make it to 100. And this is this is a spin-off show that you do exclusively for subscribers, and you hit 100. And it's been a blast the whole way through. So thank you to all of our supporters who have joined us here live. Kevin H. from Seattle and everyone.
All right. A few more of these. Garrett says, love seeing the trooper helmets being on the... being put on the stick, and Pelly walking in the background helps with the timeline. Thanks for keeping me company at work. Well, thank you very much, Garrett.
Nailed it.
Do that.
Nailed it.
Rob says, the big unanswered question is, why does Boba Fett want to be a crime lord? My guess is he is planning to avenge the natives of Tatooine. Everyone's talking about how Tem says Tatooine. I think that's a great guess. I think it does have to do with avenging the Tuskens and perhaps maybe inevitably giving them, more control over the planet, over the system there. Mitch says, water vendor, rich getting richer, ripping off poor and likely farmers. Gang wants to stand out. Want off-world like Luke. Good example of teen angst. Okay, yeah, I'll buy it, Mitch. Sorry about that. Thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. This is TJ. He says, you guys rock. Hey, I'm not sure this isn't as good as Mando. I think it might be better in some respects. Way more OT stuff and a rancor. Cheers. You know what, TJ? I don't think it's as good, personally, as Mandalorian, but I love the OT stuff so much. I love hanging out in Jabba's palace every week, man. I think it's great.
I don't want to really say necessarily one is better than the other, but I find that there is, for me with this Boba Fett show, there is a level of instant rewatchability that I have truly embraced. Where the Mandalorian.
Look at Tyler. Tyler almost broke his neck shaking his head at this point that you're making. I've been watching him all night. This is the point where he was like, yes, rewatchability. Yes.
It is.
I don't know why that is. Why do you think so, Tyler?
Well, this has so much to do with the lore, and I feel like there's so much at stake with Book of Boba Fett versus Mando, which is new. So when I watch Book of Boba, I'm like, what is this going to change from what I already knew? And then I want to pick apart every little detail and try and figure out where they're going to go. So I think that's what makes it rewatchable. I don't know. Every episode feels like a minute. It's weird.
I think he just nailed it right there. And it's not as if saying I don't like rewatching The Mandalorian, but I don't feel that immediate need to rewatch it like 500 times like I do with the Book of Boba Fett. And this week I did go back and rewatch some Mandalorian episodes. I watched the introduction of Boba in that chapter 5.
Right.
And that's where I was reminded about the Tuskens searching for Toll. And I watched the tragedy, which was the return of Boba Fett, and he reobtained his armor. And then I watched half of the next one with Bill Burr when they break into that Imperial facility. And then I just moved on to something else. And yeah, Mandalorian, I mean, is just a rich, wonderful experience. But my gosh, I must have watched today's Boba Fett show 6 times in one day. And I did the same thing the last couple weeks. So there's just something that keeps bringing me back to it. And again, I'm not, that's not a statement of judgment or anything. I'm just telling you that's a fact. That's how I naturally feel about the show. And
well, here's a super chat from old friend of ours, a great supporter of us here at RFR, our pal Rich Brendel. Very kind of you, Rich. Thank you. Chut and Choo Choo guys. Thanks to you and Tyler for giving up your Wednesday night. Fandom is better because of people like you. Well, you know what? Fandom is better because of people like you, Rich. Thanks very much. That's very kind. And we are going to get to your calls one of these days. We're going to get to your call. I promise. Here's Darth Good Guy. He says, never knew how badly I needed to see Boba riding a freaking Rancor.
There you go.
Yeah, why not? Why not, man? Of course we want to see Boba riding a Rancor.
Well, the table was set for that in this episode, so we're going to see it. It's going to happen. Also, that the Pykes being revealed as the main enemy. These are 2 very important things that the groundwork was being laid for in this episode, and it's going to pay off.
Here's more from Nivico Bar 17. My name is Kevin H. In Seattle. Been following you guys since 2006. Oh, here's the guy with the feels. Okay, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it, buddy.
He's got the feels for the Tuskens.
We've got Zenakor. I was getting the Bozuzoku, Japanese biker gang vibe. I don't know. That was a weird one.
Did you hear some beeping?
I did. I heard some beeping.
That was weird.
You know what? That's okay. That's all right. I know what it is now, but we're good. I was getting the Boss Zuzoku, Japanese biker gang vibe from those kids. Damn near Power Rangers need Fennec to tell them to grow at the end like Rita. I don't know what that means.
Somebody does. Somebody listening does know that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that contribution to the show.
Here's John. John says, more new twists on established characters makes me nervous for what their take will be. Oh, on Kenobi. That's a great point, John. Thanks for bringing that out. What can we assume we might see with Kenobi based on this? We talk about, Mandalorian was very much under the guidance of Favreau and Filoni. We see Book of Boba Fett, which is maybe a little step away from the direct control Favreau and Filoni. Obi-Wan will be another example of that. That's a good point. Wow.
I guess Rita's a character from the Power Rangers.
Oh,
just to jump back. I just wanted to say that before the confusion completely spun us out of control.
But this does make me think a little bit more about what we might see or not see in Kenobi. My brothers, I am disappointed by the lack of violence in the Black Krrstantan scene. We needed him to rip a Gamorrean limb off at the very least. I kind of agree. I would have liked to have seen some, arms at least ripped out of the socket. I don't need like ripped off completely, but certainly off the socket or out of the socket. That would have been kind of nice.
Kind of be unprecedented level of violence for Star Wars, unless somebody was holding a lightsaber, of course.
Well, right.
It seems, I don't know. I don't know if that level of violence will ever happen in Star Wars.
I didn't catch this. Red and yellow-eyed Jawas both in this episode.
Yeah, I noticed.
Red and yellow eyes. They're mixing.
Off-world Jawas, when they come on-world, they still remain the appearance of off-world. So go figure.
Go figure. Here's Shane says, looked like they just got new scooters for Christmas. Yeah, they were pretty shiny and new.
You'd think a place that was known for sandstorms would definitely take its toll on that bright paint job, but hey, it's Krylon. It's tough material. That's what they spend their money on instead of water. They spend their money on paint for their bikes.
Roger says, Boba keeps getting caught with his pants down in a fight, sort of.
Yeah.
I don't like seeing him vulnerable in most of the fights. Yeah, he really is. He really is. I do fear that the character
stand his ground, I mean, he did okay against Krrstantan, considering the fact that he was completely disoriented and soaking wet at the beginning of the fight, and he took a lot of punches and blows. But we've not seen Boba really reign supreme in a brawl with anyone, have we? I mean, outside of being a Tusken Raider.
Well, he hasn't. He hasn't shown. I don't think he's shown the level of skill and brutality that he did in the Mandalorian. That's the thing that's tripping me up. I mean, when he first showed up in Mandalorian. Now you just rewatched the episodes, Jim. So you tell us. I mean, I was listening to armor busting, bone crunching, just total maniac.
The only time he came close to really exerting that sort of violent strength was when he took down the sand monster in the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a feat of strength that actually won him the appreciation of the Tuskens, who then granted his freedom.
Right.
They took the chains off of him. So he could still kick ass, just not in, in brawls with people.
Right.
Stormtroopers, yes.
Right.
Four-armed creatures, yes. But, punks who jump across rooftops doing parkour, maybe they're a little more difficult with their laser shields. And then, of course, the Wookie. Come on. Yeah. No matter what, the Wookie is always going to be one of the most formidable opponents any person in Star Wars is going to ever face.
Absolutely.
It's like, I mean, even Thor got beat to crap by the Hulk on occasion. So, stuff happens.
It's gonna happen.
I try to talk in Marvel terms for the kids so they can maybe understand a little bit better. That's what they get. Right, Tyler?
Hey, I'm a Star Wars fan first. So.
I know you are, and I know all the Marvel kids are Star Wars fans.
Estathio says, it just sends us super chat here, $10. Thanks very much, Estathio.
Thank you, man.
Very kind. And last super chat here, Keith James. Daimyo Boba Fett and the modded spy kids, laughing until I'm crying. Yeah, that's a pretty obvious. It's a pretty obvious thing to say because it's the guy that made the spy kids. Yes, I get it, and they weren't my favorite. They weren't my favorite, but
no, me neither.
As Jim said earlier, I don't think anything here was totally unforgivable. Or a crime upon humanity, which, some others out there are not that they're saying exactly that, but by their reactions, it seems as though that's what they're suggesting. But wow, what a fun episode, and a even more fun Rebel Force Radio After Show, taking a look at Book of Boba Fett Chapter 3. Tyler, thank you so much for screening the calls. Once again, we didn't get to all the calls, but hope springs eternal. Maybe next week we'll get to some of these. A lot of new callers, which is fantastic. Yeah. And all the super chatters, thank you, everybody that was joining us live. This show keeps getting, at least our after shows keep getting bigger and bigger. And Jim and I were talking earlier about some of the numbers that we're seeing on the podcast at large. Just awesome. So we love you guys. Thank you all so much for your support. Don't forget about us on Patreon. Go to rebelforceradio.com and click on the Patreon banner, or you can go over to patreon.com and search for Rebel Force Radio, or go to patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Tyler, so that we don't get all kinds of hate mail, I got to ask you, what did you think of this episode? And what are you looking forward to as we kind of hit the midway point of this series? By the way, I know we keep sort of assuming that this is a one and done. We're starting to hear some rumors that this is just season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I mean, I loved 90% of this episode, but I didn't like 10%, which was the speeder chase. But that's all right, You get some bad balls in there. You can't always hit a homer. I just wanted to mention Matt Berry. You talked about him earlier. He's the voice of 88, but he is also a Taika connection because he is a Laszlo in What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we got Taika, who was IG-11, and we got Matt Berry now, who's at 88, and they're, okay, cool. Love that.
Yeah. And then you got another comedian as Phil Lamar as a Pike. I can't remember which Pike he was, but I know he was in there somewhere.
Yeah, he was a Pike leader there that was sitting in the office when Boba went to visit him in the flashback.
Yeah. Remember that. A lot of callers sort of had the same feelings as me. I think the Pykes are going to be the big bad, at least for shortly. And then, last thing I'll say, because I did like most of this episode, is if you enjoyed Boba Fett riding on the Mythosaur, or whatever you want to call it, in the holiday special, and you enjoy the holiday special, you will enjoy the Book of Boba Fett. So
there you go.
You're going to see him on a Rancor.
That was easy.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Jimmy Mack, Chapter 3, final thoughts?
Well, I just have a few things that I left in my notes I wanted to touch upon. We got to see the frog dog in action, the wart, as some people call it. I always call him a frog dog. And we got a burp gag from him as well. So kind of echoing what happened in Return of the Jedi. With that little guy when he was sitting outside Jabba's palace, and there was a bug and a bird, and then he slurped them both up and then burped with satisfaction. I enjoyed that little callback to Jedi. A callback that I'm not so sure I really enjoyed was the slapsticky moment during the speeder chase when guys were crossing the street with a painting of Jabba. And they rode the speeder bike right through it, and he crashed on a table there where people were dining al fresco. That painting of Jabba was actually Ralph McQuarrie art. And I feel like that's a little too self-aware, in my opinion, to actually have that moment happen. But whatever, it was a blink and you miss a moment. Some people may have liked it, so if you did, more power to you. What I did like was when the Major Domo crashed his speeder bike into the fruit stand. God, could that chase have more cliches in it? But he drove into the fruit stand, and he couldn't start his speeder up again, and you heard an audio reference to the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive malfunctioning. I've always loved that sound effect, and it was funny to hear it at that moment, and also funny to see that protocol traffic droid get spun around during the speeder bike chase. That was played by Chris Bartlett, who he's been a friend of ours here at RFR for years. He played Zero in The Mandalorian, among some other characters. Well, he's back now in the Book of Boba. There are things that need resolution via flashbacks still that we haven't seen yet. So for the fans who don't like the flashbacks and think they may have all ended and they're going away because the Tusken camp was decimated? Well, you're wrong, because there's a whole bunch of loose ends here. We have to understand how the Nikto conflict gets resolved. We need to see Boba get revenge on them for massacring the Tuskens. We know it was them because they left their symbol behind. And we also know that Boba's being pushed in that direction because that's where the Niktos are pushing him. Or there's so many species in this show. The Pykes are pushing him in that direction. Boba's bantha. I mean, he clearly doesn't have a bantha by the time we hook up with him in the Book of Boba Fett. Whatever happened to his bantha? Or maybe he checked it into the kennel when he went off world to track the man.
I was going to say maybe his folks sent it to a nice farm. Where it could...
don't you dare. My first dog, a Springer Spaniel, went to that farm.
He's probably still there.
We have to see Boba discover Cobb Vanth and learn about the existence of that armor. Now, maybe he didn't learn of the existence of that armor until he saw that big battle with the Krayt Dragon in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Maybe that's how we learned, or maybe not. Maybe he'd been keeping his eye on Cobb Vanth for a while, waiting for the right moment to strike. Also, there's the problems with Bib Fortuna that have to get resolved. The guy just doesn't walk into the palace, shoot another man point-blank range without saying a word, and then sit in his throne without some kind of background there. And we need to see more Bib Fortuna. And Fennec Shand, too. Something that's always kind of puzzled me is a lot of people take Boba Fett rescuing Fennec Shand, saving her life as she's left for dead on the sands of Tatooine. They think that that's the first time he met Fennec. And I could see that, as an audience, that's what we're seeing. But I can't help but think that they had met prior to that series of events. We know that Fennec was on Tatooine, and Boba found her easily, in enough time to rescue her. So he must have been monitoring her or something. I just can't help but think that they knew each other prior to the events of Mandalorian Season 1. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Of course, the female Tusken warrior, we never saw her body, so she could still be out there. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know about a lot of things with this show because it surprises me each and every time. But that's it for my notes, and that's it for your two favorite Star Wars scug holes. We're going to be signing off for this week.
That's it.
Max Rebo, not in this episode.
Strangely enough. All right, that's going to do it. We'll see you in just a couple of days for the flagship show here at Rebel Force Radio. The weekly RFR is back this week, so we'll be talking about the latest Star Wars news, including Book of Boba Fett and other things as well. So look for that. So please subscribe wherever you can find podcasts. Look for Rebel Force Radio. Tyler, once again, thanks to you, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Having me.
Great callers and great skills. We'll see you next time here at Rebel Force Radio. We love you all so much. And check us out again next week. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And as I say, please check us out on your favorite podcatcher of choice. We'll see you next time. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember, I said.
The Force will be with you, always.
See you next time.